Fiscal deficits in most advanced and emerging economies are continuing to narrow, despite the slowdown in global growth. If budgets are implemented as planned in 2012, deficits in advanced economies will be more than 3% of GDP below the peak reached in 2009. In most emerging economies, public finances held up much better after the crisis. Deficits have fallen by 2.5% of GDP since 2010 and are expected to stabilize this year. Given the much stronger fiscal position of emerging economies compared with advanced economies, this slowing pace of consolidation is appropriate, especially since growth is expected to weaken this year.
Altogether, countries are making good progress in reducing their deficits. Over time, this will also bring down public debt ratios. But many countries still confront the difficult trade-off between reducing deficit and debt quickly on the one hand, and providing support to growth in a climate of still high financial market volatility on the other hand. Our advice, which this Fiscal Monitor reiterates, has been to move ahead with fiscal consolidation, but to move ahead gradually, at least for the countries that are not under market pressure. Gradual adjustment, of course, implies that consolidation efforts will have to last for several years, and this will not be easy. Since public debt is very high, it will be challenging to bring it down to where it was before the crisis. But there is one avenue that can facilitate the process: faster potential growth, to be achieved, of course, through far-reaching structural reforms, can set in place what I would call a virtuous circle that can more rapidly drive down public debt as a ratio to GDP.
The virtuous circle begins with increasing the potential growth rate of the economy. Through higher GDP, the relative burden imposed by debt servicing costs come down. At the same time, fiscal balances improve and the debt-to-GDP ratio falls. Lower debt also brings down interest rates, further improving growth and the health of public finances.
Lower public debt results in lower interest rates and more private investment, and therefore higher economic growth. This in turn will create additional tax revenues and will improve fiscal balances. All these factors will work in a mutually reinforcing way to bring down public debt further.
Let's look at some numbers based on our empirical estimates to illustrate the long-term impact of growth on public debt. Let's assume that GDP growth rises permanently by 0.25%. Over a 10-year horizon, this would reduce the debt-to-GDP ratio by 6 percentage points and by more over the longer run.
Raising the growth potential of the economy combined with strengthening fiscal institutions is an opportunity to restore long-term fiscal space.
While structural reforms in goods, service and labour markets are the key policy tools to boost potential growth, fiscal policy can also play its part. Growth-friendly fiscal consolidation includes, on the revenue side, closing loopholes in the tax system, fighting against tax evasion, lowering the taxation of labour relative to taxation on consumption, and raising property taxation. On the expenditure side, cutting non-targeted welfare spending, subsidies and military spending are good places to start. Moreover, pensions and healthcare reforms can be brought forward to reassure markets that long-term spending pressures are being tackled.
Bringing down public debt from the current level of over 100% of GDP for advanced economies to pre-crisis levels may seem like an impossible task. In most countries, there is no avoiding the need to raise revenues and cut expenditures to bring down debt and deficits. Many of the required measures will be difficult and even painful, even if ideally they are phased in gradually. However, if countries manage to activate the virtuous circle that I have described, what once looked impossible might look feasible after all.